I was so excited for Pokemon Sun and Moon for many reasons. Before it released, it seemed like it'd be one of the most polished and fun Pokemon games to date. And, well, I enjoyed it for what it was and certainly played plenty of it, but I never felt fully satisfied with the game, and not because of what you'd think. I know these titles perplex a lot of people, but generally I very much enjoyed them. Even if they were a little linear and handholdy at times, they were a ton of fun and introduced a lot of amazing Pokemon, and had more realized stories than most of the games before them in many regards. You see, my disappointment came from the lack of water exploration. Regardless of what IGN might think, a region based on Hawaii being a place with beautiful oceans, islands, and locales would have been extremely intriguing and fun to explore in a Pokemon setting. And no, the goofy Mantine surf minigame from the Ultra games doesn't count. And while I didn't find it nearly as annoying as some did, it didn't really add much to the games overall in my opinion. I know people complain about Gen 3's abundance of water, but that was more so because it lacked proper places to explore, minus a few like the abandoned ship or Seamawville. But besides that and a few other miscellaneous things to do, there was just a lot of nothing. In a way, I was hoping Sun and Moon would revisit this concept again, but expand upon it and give us some interesting set pieces and locales to explore of a beautiful warm water ocean. But to be frank, the lack of that stuff didn't really bother me per se. I'm not one of those Pokemon fans that get mad at stuff that realistically was never going to happen. I still enjoyed those games a lot, even with their flaws, and I think they're fun as is. But why am I telling you all this? This isn't a review or anything. Well, I thought all these years later it might be a fun idea to take a page out of Subjectively's book, and well, I could reference thousands of other channels here, because this isn't an original concept per se. That's the channel that sparked my interest in doing this after all this time. I can try my hand at designing some Fakemons for my own region, focusing on warm oceans and exploration. But of course it can't be based on Hawaii, I mean, it's already been done. So instead it'd be based on wider Caribbean ideas and locales, but in a looser manner than something like Alola, as it still offers that island and warm water aesthetic I desire, but I also don't want to be too restricted, which is pretty in line with Pokemon's way of handling regions for the most part, so I feel that's a safe approach. So for this video, I will attempt to design some starters for the region, probably just the base forms, and if this video does well, I'll continue designing new aspects for the region from there. Also, this is my first time making Fakemon since middle school, so the likability that I will need to redesign these several times is certain, and if you want to contribute to those redesigns, or give me tips and tricks that may help me, don't be afraid to do the YouTube thing and like, comment, and subscribe, and if you have any designs to share, I also have a Twitter, for the time being. I'm pretty sure that app is about to implode any day now. For these designs, I'm kind of taking the Rowlet approach, not throwing the primary colors of blue, red, or usually orange, and green in your face, and instead taking a more laid-back approach to some degree, though I kind of double back on that in some regards. There's nothing wrong with the bolder color schemes. I know it's done for clarity and that does make for stronger designs, but I just thought it'd be a fun way to mix some stuff up, and we can always go back and tweak that aspect if it's too subtle. Regardless, for our water starter, I decided to base it off of the Gyrolus parvis. I probably pronounced that correctly, maybe? Or otherwise known as the ash gyro, a common freshwater snail that tends to make itself at home in Ranhorn-shaped shells, typically ones that are semi-transparent, which I thought make for a fun detail to separate from other snail-like Pokemon. For the Pokemon itself, I decided to go for a more worried and shy look to the Mon, as if they're hesitantly peeking out of their shell, alongside adding some moss and stones to the outer part of their shell for added flair, showing their affinity for staying close to waterbeds more inland around foresty areas. But I did change this pretty quickly, as after some feedback it seems that the moss made it a tad confusing as to its typing, which I think is fair, so I changed it into seaweed. Even though ash gyros are typically freshwater snails, but it's Pokemon, I don't think it needs to be one-to-one with anything. Also, seaweed can technically grow in freshwater as well, so whatever. As for the coloring, I went through quite a few changes. Also forgot to record footage for some of those coloring phases, so whoops. I initially went with these more earthy colors and oranges to match the real life inspiration, but thought it didn't really sell the water typing and made it feel more like a grass type or ground type. So I instead swapped out that palette for a much softer one with more whites, blues, and a pinkish shell, which I did up changing as well to a light orangey yellow. So now all I gotta do is name it. My weakness. Paradise, a mix between the species name and the species family name, Planorbioda. I'm not 100% committed to that name, but that's always been my weakness, so I'll gladly take any alternative suggestions if you leave any in the comments. That applies to all of these mons. Paradise is a shy but kind Pokemon often seen by waterbeds, where it's most comfortable. Their shells look frail but are quite sturdy and allow them to hide safely from even the toughest of predators. The fire starter I struggled with for a bit. After doing the water snail, something we've seen time and time again, I wanted to do something we hadn't seen before, which can be quite a struggle with Pokemon at times, especially since it's rare that starters aren't inspired from some sort of real life animal, limiting our options at the gate. Originally I was going to do an anteater, but then I remembered Heatmor existed and I wasn't sure I could justify another considering Heatmor is already pretty well designed as is. Then a lot of the other animals commonplace in the Caribbean were either better off as grass types or some other type, or had an equivalent I didn't want to contest with. So in the end I decided to go with a possum, as they are moderately common in certain parts of the Caribbean and I can't think of any Pokemon directly based on them, unless I'm misremembering, which is possible. There's over 1,000 at this point. The design itself isn't very complex, it is a starter after all, so I didn't want it to be too busy. With that I did a semi-normal possum-esque creature, of course designing in a way that better fits in the world of Pokemon. Originally, I wasn't going to do a flame tail or something along those lines like the other starters, but I had recently been in the mall and saw some lava lamps, which felt like a fun thing to pull inspiration from here for this tail, and to match the cool look, a flaming mohawk of sorts felt pretty appropriate to pull everything together. Though after everything was said and done, the original render felt a bit too stiff to me and didn't offer much in terms of personality, so I did re-render it. And here's Cobosum, the name coming from combustion, which means to burn, and well, possum. Cobosum is known to be quite a troublemaker, using its tail to hang from trees till it inevitably burns through the branch. It scares easily and will play dead as a form of self-defense, releasing a foul odor that induces nausea when around for too long. And finally, the grass starter. And I want to say I struggled again, but as soon as I looked through animals native to the Caribbean and saw this, I knew it had to be done. I mean, come on. Capybaras are rad as hell. Though I know what you might be thinking. Capybara seems like an odd choice. An aquatic animal? That's a tad weird to turn into a grass type, huh? Well, all I'm gonna say is if this video does okay enough, I guess we'll see how it comes around in the final evolution. But for now, trust me when I say I have a plan. For this design, I once again kept it pretty simple, just starting with a Pokemon-esque stylization of a capybara and taking that mossy concept I originally had in Paradise and applying it here where it feels a lot more fitting, alongside adding a tropical Plumerera, which I hopefully said correctly, to give it a little bit more flavor. However, the original render and flower felt a bit off to me, so I once again re-rendered it with a more fitting pose and changed the flower to a water lily, a type of flower commonly seen in or near waterbeds like ponds, and I decided to call them Mobera, a combination between moss and capybara, and by far the simplest name. Moberas are known to be quite friendly, yet overprotective over their territory, often seen by water accompanied by foliage that they then tend to and assure the growth of. Paradise tend to help Mobera's effort in exchange for protection. I wasn't planning to do the trainers in this video, but thought I might as well as it gives me ample time to explore some new designs and get feedback on them as well so they can be tweaked for the next video. As for the designs, I was a bit scared to tackle these, as weird as that sounds. I didn't want to pick and choose from different cultures from the Caribbean, as there's just a lot to choose from, and I didn't really want to pick any specific cultures to draw from for the main trainer specifically, as to keep them more broad, as it helps the player feel they can imprint onto them easier. The Caribbean's inspiration is supposed to be loose, but even then I'd be doing a damn injustice if I didn't explore all the cultures surrounding these islands, as it's home to many different cultures and traditions, yet they all seem to have a sense of community with each other, and it's kind of beautiful in a lot of ways. So I will be trying to make Pokemon and trainers more ingrained with these facets in the future, but keep the playable trainers more broad in that aspect. For the female trainer, I went with a similar route to Sun and Moon's trainers, having a nice colorful palette and clothes more geared towards a warmer client with a tank top and sandals. Also, I'm sorry to give her socks and sandals, but I didn't want to draw feet, so As for the male trainer, I don't really know. I tried my best with this design, but I really struggle with male designs. I don't really draw men often. I usually just draw either women, monsters, or just whatever random thing comes to mind. But since about middle school or so, I kind of stopped drawing just normal men, if you will. I can't really say why, because I don't particularly know myself. Maybe I'll figure it out in the future at some point, but either way, with that in mind, I still tried to make a counterpart, designing them with more of a mix of warm and cool colors, but leaning more towards the cooler colors, as the other design leaned more towards the warmer colors. I made their clothes more in line with the island aesthetic, wearing a light cardigan, swim trunks, and water shoes, though I can imagine water shoes being very comfortable. And besides that, I don't really have much to say. I gave them a fun little straw hat, and I gave both of them these little like berry watches just because I thought that was cute. In the end, if there's any design I'm not confident in, it's this one. So don't hesitate to give me any suggestions or feedback, especially for this one. And there we go, the start to my new region that we'll see if I ever continue. Because I'm not the first or last person to do this, so we'll see if this ever gains any traction. Regardless, I had a ton of fun doing this, and I would like to continue it, but it was definitely a bit draining, so as always, we'll see. As long as it does better than that Pokemon Creepypasta video, then I'll be happy, because that did so poorly. Either way, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, consider doing the YouTube thing, or even supporting me further by hitting that join button to directly support me. But don't ever feel like you'd need to. It's just there in case you want to, or want some cool badges and emotes. And with that, I'll see y'all next time. Bye!